She kissed a stranger to avoid her toxic ex, unaware he was a billionaire CEO who'd fall for her. At a glittering charity gala, a woman trapped in fear makes one desperate move. She grabs the nearest man and kisses him in front of everyone. The cameras flash, her ex freezes, and her life changes forever. But the man she kissed isn't just anyone. He's powerful, private, and haunted by a secret that money can't erase. When the story goes viral, she becomes the woman the whole city is talking about, and he becomes the only man who can save her. Soon, fake love turns into something dangerously real, until a dark lie from her past threatens to destroy them both. In a world obsessed with image, can a kiss born from fear become the one thing that sets them free? Or will the truth turn the fairy tale into a scandal no one saw coming? Tell me in the comments where you're watching from right now, and if this story speaks to you, make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. The Atlanta Grand Ballroom sparkled like a sea of stars, crystal chandeliers casting warm light over tables draped in white silk. Gracelyn Parker tugged at the borrowed silver gown that hugged her curves, feeling like a child playing dress-up among the city's elite. Her fingers traced the delicate beading at the waist, a beautiful dress loaned by a shelter volunteer who insisted she needed to dress the part for the charity gala. "Just smile and remember why you're here," she whispered to herself, clutching her small evening bag. Inside was her carefully prepared speech about Safe Haven Women's Shelter, the words she hoped would open hearts and wallets to help the women who depended on their services. The champagne flowed freely as Atlanta's wealthy and powerful mingled, their laughter echoing off the gilded walls. Gracelyn sipped water, needing to keep her mind clear. That's when she saw him. Damian Rhodes stood across the room, holding court among a circle of admirers. His perfectly tailored tuxedo and brilliant smile hadn't changed, but Gracelyn knew what lay beneath that polished surface. Her stomach clenched as memories flooded back, the cruel words, the tight grip on her arm, the constant reminders of her place. Their eyes met across the crowded room. His smile widened, but it didn't reach his eyes. Those remained cold, calculating, promising trouble. Gracelyn quickly turned away, her heart hammering against her ribs. She made it through the first course by focusing on her table companions, grateful none seemed to notice how her hands trembled. But during the main course, she excused herself to visit the bar, needing a moment alone to steady her nerves. That's when Damian struck. "My dear Gracelyn." His voice was honey smooth as he cornered her against the bar. "You look almost presentable tonight, though that dress is clearly borrowed. You never did have the class to dress properly for these events." "Please leave me alone, Damian." She tried to keep her voice steady, but it wavered slightly. He stepped closer, his expensive cologne overwhelming. Now, is that any way to speak to someone who could make or break your precious little shelter? One word from me to the right people about your questionable judgment, and those donations might just dry up. Gracelyn felt the familiar panic rising in her chest, the same helpless feeling that had controlled her for so long when they were together. Her eyes darted around the room, searching for escape. That's when she saw him, a tall figure in a perfectly fitted black tuxedo, standing slightly apart from the crowd. Unlike the other guests who were lost in conversation and laughter, he seemed to be quietly observing everything around him with careful attention. There was something different about him, a stillness that drew her eye. Damian's fingers closed around her arm, his grip painful despite his pleasant expression. "You know your place, Gracelyn. It's time you remembered it." In that moment, something inside her snapped. 2 years of therapy, of rebuilding herself, of helping other women find their strength, she wouldn't let him take that away. Without thinking, she yanked free of his grip and rushed toward the stranger in the black tuxedo. Time seemed to slow as she approached him. His dark eyes widened slightly as she drew near, but he didn't move away. Gracelyn placed her hand on his chest, feeling the solid warmth beneath the crisp shirt, and stretched up on her toes. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, just before pressing her lips to his. The ballroom fell silent. She could hear the soft clink of suspended champagne glasses, the collective intake of breath from the gathered crowd. For a terrifying moment, the stranger remained completely still, and Gracelyn thought she'd made a horrible mistake. Then his arm slipped around her waist, drawing her closer. His lips softened against hers, and though it was just for show, the gentleness of his touch made her heart skip. He smelled of cedar and something else she couldn't name, clean and masculine. When they parted seconds later, his dark eyes studied her face with quiet intensity. "Go with it," he whispered, his voice low and reassuring. Camera flashes exploded around them like lightning, capturing the moment for tomorrow's society pages. Gracelyn could see Damien from the corner of her eye, his face twisted with rage as he stormed toward the exit, shoving past a waiter who barely managed to keep his tray of drinks from crashing to the floor. The stranger's arm remained steady around her waist, a silent source of support as whispers rippled through the crowd. He turned slightly, creating a shield between her and the curious onlookers with his broad shoulders. "I'm Jack Cross," he said softly, for her ears alone. His voice was deep but gentle, like distant thunder without the storm. "And I believe you might need a moment to breathe." Gracelyn nodded, unable to find her voice. The reality of what she'd just done was starting to sink in. She'd kissed a complete stranger, and not just any stranger, but a man who commanded attention even in his stillness. The warmth of his hand at her waist kept her grounded as her mind spun with the implications of her impulsive action. "I'm so sorry," she managed finally, her cheeks burning. "I shouldn't have. I was just—" "It's all right," he interrupted softly, the hint of a smile touching his lips. "Sometimes the best decisions are the ones we don't plan." Around them, the gala was returning to its normal rhythm, though Gracelyn could feel curious eyes still watching them. She remained close to Jack, grateful for his solid presence as her racing heart gradually slowed to its normal pace. "I'm Gracelyn Parker," she offered, realizing she hadn't properly introduced herself. "I run Safe Haven Women's Shelter, and I just assaulted you with my lips in front of half of Atlanta's social elite." A quiet chuckle escaped him, warming his serious expression. "I've suffered worse fates at charity galas, believe me." His eyes studied her face more carefully. "Though I suspect there's more to this story than a sudden irresistible attraction to strangers in tuxedos." Before Gracelyn could respond, a waiter appeared with fresh champagne. Jack smoothly took 2 glasses, offering one to her. His movements were elegant but understated, everything about him suggesting quiet confidence rather than the showy charm Damien had always displayed. "Thank you," she said, accepting both the champagne and the moment to collect her thoughts. "And thank you for playing along. I know that was completely inappropriate and probably very uncomfortable for you." Jack's dark eyes held hers steadily. "Sometimes the inappropriate choice is exactly the right one." He paused, then added with subtle humor, "Though perhaps next time, a simple hello might work just as well." Gracelyn couldn't help but smile, feeling some of her embarrassment ease. There was something about Jack's calm presence that made the chaos of the evening feel more manageable, like a port in a storm. The noise of the gala faded as Jack guided Gracelyn toward the balcony. The cool evening air brushed against her bare shoulders, and the Atlanta skyline sparkled before them like scattered diamonds on black velvet. Here, away from the curious stares and whispers, she could finally breathe. "I can't believe I did that," Gracelyn said, pressing her cool champagne glass to her flushed cheek. "I'm usually so careful, so professional." She turned to face Jack, who leaned casually against the stone railing. "I really am sorry for putting you in that position." Jack's eyes crinkled slightly at the corners as he watched her. "You know, most people at these events are trying to get my attention, not apologizing for it." His voice held a hint of amusement that made her shoulders relax slightly. "You handled yourself. Well in there." A small laugh escaped her, surprising them both. "Well, I practically attacked you. I've been to enough of these galas to recognize when someone needs an escape route." He took a slow sip of his champagne, though I admit yours was rather creative. Their shared laughter broke the remaining tension, floating away on the night breeze. Gracelyn found herself studying him more closely now that they were alone. In the soft lighting, she could see the touches of silver at his temples, the quiet intelligence in his dark eyes. "I actually hate these events," she admitted, running her finger along the rim of her glass. "All the fancy dresses and small talk, but Safe Haven needs the donations, and this is where the donors are." Jack nodded, his expression softening. "Same here. Well, not the dress part." That drew another smile from her. "But I believe in supporting good causes, even if it means enduring endless conversations about yacht clubs and golf handicaps. At least you look like you belong here." Gracelyn gestured to his perfectly tailored tuxedo. "I borrowed this dress from my friend. I've been terrified all night I'd spill something on it." "You look—" Jack paused, choosing his words carefully. "Like someone who knows her true worth isn't measured by a price tag." The sincerity in his voice made her chest tight. Gracelyn glanced at her watch, realizing how late it had grown. "I should probably go. I have an early meeting tomorrow." As she turned to leave, Jack's voice stopped her. "Are you safe?" The question was gentle but direct, his eyes serious now. "That man who was bothering you—" "I'm fine," she assured him quickly, perhaps too quickly. "Really? Thank you for asking, though. And thank you for everything tonight." Back in her tiny apartment across town, Gracelyn kicked off her borrowed heels with a sigh of relief. The evening felt surreal now, like a dream she'd wake up from any moment. She changed into her comfortable pajamas, made a cup of chamomile tea, and finally allowed herself to check her phone. The teacup nearly slipped from her fingers. There it was, splashed across every local news website and social media platform. The photo of her kissing Jack Cross. "The kiss seen around Atlanta," the headlines declared. Some called it romantic, others scandalous. The comment sections were already filling up with speculation and gossip. "Oh no," she whispered, scrolling through the endless coverage. The photos were everywhere, her hand on his chest, his arm around her waist, their faces close together in what looked like an intimate moment rather than the desperate escape plan it had been. She clicked on one article and felt her stomach drop further. "Mystery woman captures Atlanta's most eligible bachelor." The piece went on to detail Jack's impressive business achievements, his philanthropic work, and his status as one of the city's wealthiest residents. She hadn't known, hadn't had any idea who he really was when she'd approached him. Gracelyn set her phone down and crawled into bed, pulling her quilt up to her chin. "Lord," she prayed softly, "please let this blow over quickly, and thank you for sending someone kind tonight when I needed help." Across town, in his penthouse suite at the Atlantic, Jack Cross sat in his leather chair, tablet in hand, looking at those same headlines. The city lights twinkled beyond his floor-to-ceiling windows, but his attention was fixed on the image of Gracelyn Parker's face just before she'd kissed him, determined yet vulnerable, brave despite her fear. He'd learned her full name from the event registry, the director of Safe Haven Women's Shelter. It made sense now, her reaction to the aggressive man at the bar. Jack had seen the fear in her eyes, recognized it from working with domestic violence charities over the years. A notification popped up. Another news outlet had picked up the story. Jack should have been annoyed by the attention, should have been calling his PR team to manage the situation. Instead, he found himself smiling, remembering how she'd apologized for assaulting him with her lips. The usual evening stillness of his penthouse felt different tonight, less empty somehow. He looked out at the city sprawled below, wondering if Gracelyn was home safe, if she'd seen the headlines yet. For the first time in years, his thoughts weren't immediately turning to tomorrow's meetings or quarterly reports. He caught his reflection in the window. He was still smiling. It felt foreign on his face, this unexpected warmth. The last time he'd smiled like this, well, it had been a very long time. The city hummed its constant urban lullaby outside his windows, but inside, the quiet felt charged with possibility. Jack set his tablet aside, the image of Gracelyn Parker's silver dress catching the light, as she'd turned to leave, still playing in his mind. He'd meant what he said about her handling things well. In a world of calculated social climbing and carefully orchestrated appearances, her raw honesty had been like a breath of fresh air. His phone buzzed. Another news alert about the kiss. Tomorrow his PR team would want to discuss damage control. There would be questions to answer, speculation to manage. But tonight, Jack allowed himself to simply sit with the memory of an unexpected moment that had somehow pierced through years of careful emotional distance. The insistent buzzing of her phone dragged Gracelyn from sleep. Sunlight streamed through her curtains as she fumbled for the device, squinting at the screen. 7:15 in the morning, and already 43 text messages, 28 missed calls, and countless social media notifications lit up her display. "Oh dear Lord," she mumbled, sitting up in bed. Her head throbbed slightly from too little sleep and too much worry. The first message she opened was from Safe Haven's board secretary. "Emergency meeting called. Please respond, ASAP." Her fingers trembled as she scrolled through the texts. Co-workers, volunteers, even donors she'd met only once. Everyone wanted to know about the kiss. Local news stations requested interviews. The Atlanta Journal-Constitution wanted her statement. Even morning radio shows were trying to reach her. Gracelyn jumped out of bed, her heart racing. She threw on a simple navy dress and practical flats, barely taking time to run a brush through her hair. The drive to Safe Haven seemed endless, though traffic was mercifully light for an Atlanta morning. When she rushed through the shelter's front doors, Lydia Carter was waiting, arms crossed and eyebrows raised. Her friend's expression wavered between amusement and concern. "Well, well," Lydia drawled, holding up her phone with the notorious photo displayed. "Someone had an interesting evening. You know, when I told you to get back out there, this wasn't exactly what I had in mind." "Lydia, please," Gracelyn groaned, following her friend into the small break room. "It's not what everyone thinks. I was trying to escape a bad situation with Damien and—" "Damien was there?" Lydia's teasing smile vanished. "That snake showed up at the gala. Are you okay?" "I'm fine." Gracelyn poured herself a cup of coffee with shaking hands. "But he was being Damien, making threats. I panicked and saw this stranger standing alone, and I just planted one on Atlanta's most eligible billionaire." Lydia finished, her voice gentler now. "Honey, do you even know who Jack Cross is?" "I'm learning very quickly." Gracelyn sighed, sinking into a chair. "The donors won't stop calling. They're worried about the shelter's reputation. Mrs. Henderson from the board called it unseemly behavior. Mrs. Henderson needs to mind her own business," Lydia said firmly. "But we should probably figure out how to handle this. The morning shows are calling, and Channel 5 wants to do a feature on the shelter. No interviews, Graceland said quickly. This was a misunderstanding. It'll blow over if we just stay quiet. You kissed Jack Cross. Lydia emphasized each word. That man hasn't been linked to anyone since his wife died 5 years ago. This isn't going to just blow over. Across town, in the gleaming headquarters of Crosstech Industries, similar conversations were taking place. The public relations team had commandeered the main conference room, phones ringing constantly as they tried to manage the situation. Mr. Cross, his assistant, Margaret, hurried to keep up with his long strides as he headed to his office. People magazine is on line 1. The Today Show wants you for tomorrow morning, and the board is concerned about stock prices. The stock prices are fine, Jack said calmly, stopping at his desk. He looked out the floor-to-ceiling windows at the Atlanta skyline, his expression thoughtful. And I'm not doing any interviews? So, with respect, we need to get ahead of this story. Margaret persisted. Social media is going crazy with speculation. Who is she? Are you dating? Was it staged? We need to release a statement. No, Jack said firmly, turning to face his assistant of 8 years. I won't have her ridiculed or turned into tabloid fodder. She was helping women in crisis when I was at that gala. She doesn't deserve to have her work overshadowed by gossip. Margaret blinked, surprised by the steel in his voice. It had been years since she'd seen him this protective of anyone. Then what would you like us to do? Jack straightened his tie, a decision forming. Clear my evening schedule. I need to handle this personally. The day at Safe Haven passed in a blur of crisis management. Graceland focused on her work, counseling sessions, resource coordination, helping a new arrival get settled. But every phone call, every email seemed to circle back to the previous night's events. By 6:30 in the evening, she was exhausted. The shelter was quiet now, most of the women either in their rooms or the common area. Lydia had left an hour ago, after extracting a promise that Graceland would call if she needed anything. She gathered her things and did her final walkthrough, checking doors and windows. The security system's soft beeping kept her company as she moved through the building, making sure everything was secure for the night. Just as she stepped outside and turned to lock the front door, she heard a car pull up behind her. The soft purr of an expensive engine made her turn around slowly, her heart skipping a beat. A sleek black Audi had stopped at the curb. The driver's door opened, and Jack Cross stepped out, looking somehow even more handsome in a casual charcoal sweater and dark jeans than he had in his tuxedo. He was holding 2 coffee cups from the expensive cafe downtown, and his smile was warm and slightly apologetic. We should talk, he said gently, holding out one of the cups toward her. The streetlight caught his kind eyes, and Graceland felt her tight shoulders relax slightly. After a day of chaos and judgment, his calm presence was oddly reassuring. He looked nothing like the cold, intimidating CEO the media portrayed. Instead, he seemed human, real. She took the offered coffee, catching the scent of what smelled like her favorite hazelnut blend. How did you know where to find me? The shelter's address is public information, he said simply. And I thought you might need this after the day you've probably had. Graceland followed Jack to a small cafe tucked away on a quiet street corner. The Moonlight Cafe lived up to its name, with twinkling lights strung across exposed brick walls and soft jazz playing in the background. At this hour, they were the only customers, which felt like a relief after a day of being in the spotlight. Jack pulled out a chair for her at a corner table, far from the windows. The gesture was oddly gentlemanly, making her wonder again about the man behind the headlines. Thank you, she said softly, wrapping her hands around the coffee he'd brought. For the coffee, and for not being angry about last night. Jack settled into his chair, a hint of amusement playing at the corners of his mouth. Angry? No. Surprised? Definitely. But sometimes the best moments in life are the unexpected ones. His words caught her off guard. Everything she'd read about Jack Cross painted him as a ruthless businessman, not this thoughtful man sitting across from her. I need to explain about Damien, she started, but Jack held up a hand. You don't owe me any explanations about your ex, he said firmly. I saw enough last night to understand the situation. Gracelyn felt tears pricking at her eyes, touched by his understanding. She blinked them away quickly. Still, I shouldn't have involved you without your permission. The media attention must be causing problems for your company. To her surprise, Jack actually chuckled. Actually, you might have done me a favor. He leaned forward, his expression becoming more serious. My company has been dealing with some complicated issues. A former employee made some allegations about corporate practices. The press has been relentless. The whistleblower case? Gracelyn asked. She'd seen headlines about it. Jack nodded. But since last night, every news outlet has been too busy speculating about our romance to dig deeper into those stories. You've given us breathing room to address the situation properly. He paused, studying her face carefully before continuing. Which brings me to a proposition. Gracelyn's stomach tightened. What kind of proposition? A mutually beneficial arrangement, Jack said carefully. If you'd be willing to maintain the appearance of a relationship for 1 month, just in public settings, I'd like to make a substantial donation to Safe Haven. Gracelyn's breath caught. How substantial? $500,000. The number hit her like a physical force. That kind of money could keep Safe Haven running for years. They could finally fix the leaking roof, upgrade the security system, maybe even expand their counseling services. But pride made her sit up straighter. I'm not for sale, Mr. Cross. Jack, he corrected gently. And I'm not trying to buy you. Think of it as a partnership. You help me manage a public relations situation, and I help you help more women in need. Put that way, it didn't sound so terrible, but doubt still gnawed at her. I don't like lying. Neither do I. Jack agreed, which is why I'm being completely honest with you now. 1 month of public appearances. Nothing inappropriate, nothing behind closed doors. Just enough to let this story run its natural course before we amicably part ways. Gracelyn stirred her coffee, buying time to think. I need time to consider it. Of course, Jack said immediately. Take all the time you need. He pulled out a business card and wrote something on the back. This is my personal number. When you decide, call me, directly. The drive home was a blur of conflicting thoughts. As soon as she got to her apartment, Gracelyn called Lydia. He wants what? Lydia exclaimed after Gracelyn explained everything. I know it sounds crazy, Gracelyn said, pacing her small living room. But Lydia, think what we could do with that money. We could help so many more women. And what's the cost to you? Lydia asked carefully. Honey, you've worked too hard healing from Damien to let another man control your life. Jack's different, Gracelyn found herself saying. He was kind, respectful. He didn't pressure me at all. That's what worries me, Lydia said. The nice ones can be the most dangerous. Just be careful, okay? Pray about it. Don't rush into anything. After hanging up, Gracelyn did exactly that. She sat on her worn couch, Bible in her lap, and poured out her heart to God. The words of Proverbs 31 verse 8 came to mind. Speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves, for the rights of all who are destitute. Wasn't that exactly what this money could help her do? She barely slept that night, tossing and turning as she weighed her options. As the first rays of dawn painted her bedroom walls, She reached for her phone and the business card on her nightstand. Jack answered on the second ring, sounding wide awake. "Good morning, Gracelyn. I'll do it," she said firmly. "But I have conditions." "I'm listening." "First, no lies beyond what's necessary for public appearances. I won't pretend to be in love with you or make up stories about our relationship." "Agreed." "Second, you respect my boundaries. No unexpected touches, no unplanned kisses, no showing up at my work without warning." "Absolutely," Jack said without hesitation. "Anything else?" Gracelyn took a deep breath. "Yes, the donation goes directly to Safe Haven, not to me. And if at any point this arrangement makes me uncomfortable, I can walk away. No questions asked, no repercussions for the shelter." There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then Jack said softly, "You're a remarkable woman, Gracelyn Parker. I accept your terms completely. Shall we meet later today to discuss the details?" Gracelyn smoothed her navy pencil skirt as she entered the gleaming glass office building of Crosstech Industries. The marble lobby echoed with her footsteps as a security guard directed her to the executive elevator. Her heart fluttered with each ascending floor. Jack's executive assistant, a poised woman named Margaret, greeted her with a warm smile. "Mr. Cross and the attorney are waiting in the conference room. Would you like some water?" "Yes, please," Gracelyn said, her throat suddenly dry. The conference room had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Atlanta's skyline. Jack stood when she entered, dressed in a charcoal suit that somehow made him look both powerful and approachable. "Good morning, Gracelyn. This is David Chen, my personal attorney." The lawyer nodded professionally, spreading documents across the polished table. "Ms. Parker, we've drafted an agreement that incorporates all the conditions you discussed with Mr. Cross." Gracelyn read through each page carefully, grateful for her years of reviewing shelter contracts. The terms were exactly as discussed. 1 month of public appearances, the $500,000 donation to Safe Haven, and clear boundaries about their arrangement. "Everything looks in order," she said, signing where indicated. Jack's signature followed, his pen scratching quietly against the paper. "Now," Jack said once the formalities were complete, "would you join me for lunch? There's a restaurant I think you'll enjoy, and it would be a good opportunity to begin our public appearance." The restaurant, Bella Vista, was exactly the kind of place Gracelyn usually avoided. All crystal chandeliers and white tablecloths. Jack helped her from his car, his hand gentle at her elbow. Camera flashes sparked from across the street. "Paparazzi," he murmured. "Just smile naturally and keep walking." Inside, their table offered a stunning view of the city. Gracelyn fidgeted with her napkin, hyper-aware of the curious glances from other diners. "Relax," Jack said softly. "You look like you're facing a firing squad rather than a lunch menu." A surprised laugh escaped her. Is it that obvious? Only to someone who's perfected the art of looking comfortable while feeling anything but. His admission carried a hint of self-deprecation that made her look at him more closely. Their waiter appeared, and Jack ordered for both of them with easy confidence. As they waited for their food, an awkward silence settled between them. "So," Gracelyn ventured, "do you usually bring your fake girlfriends here?" The question startled a genuine laugh from Jack, a rich, warm sound that transformed his face. "Actually," he said, "I can't remember the last time I laughed like that. Years, probably. Not since Sarah." He trailed off, something vulnerable flickering across his features. "Sarah," Gracelyn prompted gently. Jack's fingers traced the rim of his water glass. "My wife. She died 4 years ago. Car accident on a rainy night." "I'm so sorry," Gracelyn said softly, resisting the urge to reach for his hand. "It was sudden. One moment we were planning our future, the next." He shook his head. "I threw myself into work after that. Easier than facing an empty house. Their food arrived, providing a welcome break from the heavy moment. As they ate, Gracelyn found herself sharing her own story. "I met Damien at a fundraiser, actually," she said, pushing a piece of salmon around her plate. "He was so charming, so generous to the shelter. I thought I'd found someone who shared my passion for helping others." Jack listened intently as she continued. "But the control started small. Suggestions about my clothes, my friends, my work hours. He'd say he was protecting me, that he knew best. By the time I realized love shouldn't feel like walking on eggshells, I'd lost pieces of myself I'm still trying to find." "How did you get out?" Jack asked quietly. "One of the shelter residents. She saw the signs. Helped me see them too. It's why I stayed working there. Sometimes we can't recognize our own cage until someone else points out the bars." Their conversation flowed more easily after that, moving to lighter topics. Jack told her about his company's latest technology projects, and Gracelyn shared funny stories from the shelter's children's program. As the afternoon light began to fade, they walked back to his car. Jack opened her door, conscious of the photographers still lurking nearby. Instead of immediately letting go of her hand, he held it for a moment longer than necessary. "Thank you for today," he said quietly, "for sharing your story." Back at her apartment that evening, Gracelyn kicked off her shoes and collapsed onto her couch, mentally replaying the day. Her phone buzzed with a text message. "Thank you for trusting me. I won't let you down. Jack." A small smile tugged at her lips as she read the message. The whole situation was still surreal. The contract, the cameras, the fancy lunch. But something about Jack's quiet honesty made it feel less like a business arrangement and more like something else. Something she wasn't quite ready to name. She responded with a simple, "Thank you for listening," before setting her phone aside and trying to ignore the way her hand still tingled from his touch. The evening settled around her, filled with the familiar sounds of her neighborhood. Children playing outside, cars passing, the distant whistle of a train. Yet somehow, her small apartment felt different tonight. As if the world had shifted slightly on its axis, though she couldn't quite tell which direction it was tilting. The next 2 weeks unfolded like pages from someone else's life. Gracelyn found herself attending more high-profile events in 7 days than she had in her entire career. Jack was always there, his hand steady at the small of her back, his smile growing more genuine each time. At a downtown arts fundraiser, cameras caught them sharing a quiet laugh near the string quartet. "What's so funny?" a reporter called out. Jack leaned closer to Gracelyn, his breath warm against her ear. "Tell them it's our little secret," he whispered, making her giggle again. The resulting photo appeared in 3 magazines, with headlines gushing about Atlanta's new power couple. During a charity luncheon at the Ritz-Carlton, Gracelyn noticed Jack watching her as she spoke passionately about safe haven to potential donors. His eyes held something she couldn't quite read. Pride, perhaps, or admiration. The thought made her cheeks warm. Their 3rd week of pretending brought them to a photo shoot for Atlanta Society magazine. The photographer positioned them near a sun-drenched window, Jack's arm draped casually around Gracelyn's shoulders. "You're better at this than I am," he murmured between shots, his lips barely moving. Gracelyn turned slightly toward him, fighting back a smile. "Better at what?" "Making this feel real." His words were soft enough that only she could hear them. The photographer called for them to look at each other. When their eyes met, something electric passed between them. The camera clicked rapidly, capturing whatever that moment held. Later that evening, as they walked to his car, Jack surprised her. "I'd like to see the shelter," he said. "Not for publicity, no cameras. I just want to understand your world better. Gracelyn hesitated only briefly before nodding. "Follow me in your car." The shelter occupied an old Victorian house, its paint fading, but its spirit strong. Jack's expensive car looked out of place in the modest parking lot, but he seemed completely at ease as he followed Gracelyn inside. She introduced him to the evening staff and the residents who were comfortable meeting him. Many recognized him from the news, but his gentle demeanor put them at ease. In the community room, 8-year-old Maria showed him her homework, and Jack spent 10 minutes helping her with multiplication tables. The tour paused when they reached the kitchen, where several women were huddled near a broken heater, wrapped in blankets despite the mild evening. "The repairman can't come until next week," Gracelyn explained apologetically. Without a word, Jack removed his suit jacket and rolled up his sleeves. "Do you have any tools?" For the next 45 minutes, he knelt on the floor, dismantling the heater's cover and working with quiet concentration. Gracelyn watched as his capable hands diagnosed and fixed the problem, her heart doing strange flips in her chest. "There," he said finally, standing and wiping his hands on a borrowed dish towel. Warm air began flowing steadily from the unit. The women's grateful thanks made him duck his head modestly. "You're full of surprises," Gracelyn said as they walked toward her office. "I rebuilt engines to pay for college," he admitted, before the tech company took off. In her small office, they settled on the worn couch with Chinese takeout containers balanced on their laps. The clock on her desk showed 9:30, but neither seemed inclined to leave. "Why haven't you remarried?" The question slipped out before Gracelyn could stop it. "Sorry, that's too personal. No, it's fair." Jack set down his container. "I guess I never met anyone who made me want to try again. Until—" He trailed off, studying his chopsticks. "What about you?" Gracelyn drew her knees up to her chest, making herself smaller. "After Damien, I stopped believing in forever. The fairy tale ending seemed like just that. A fairy tale. Maybe it's not about forever," Jack said softly. "Maybe it's about faith." Their eyes met in the quiet office. Outside, a car horn honked in the distance. The wall clock ticked steadily toward midnight, but the sound seemed far away. Jack's hand rested on the couch between them, inches from hers. The urge to bridge that small gap was overwhelming. The shelter's security system beeped, indicating midnight rounds. Neither of them moved. The moment stretched like warm honey, sweet and golden and impossible to rush. Gracelyn couldn't remember the last time silence felt so comfortable or so dangerous. Jack shifted slightly, his knee brushing against hers. "I should probably go," he said, though he made no move to stand. "Probably," Gracelyn agreed, staying exactly where she was. Through the window, Atlanta's lights twinkled like earthbound stars. The night felt suspended, balanced on the edge of something neither of them was ready to name. Their empty takeout containers sat forgotten on her desk, testament to a simple meal that had somehow become something more. The security guard's footsteps passed by her office door, then faded. Still, they sat in that comfortable silence, neither willing to be the first to break the spell that had settled over them. The pretense of their arrangement felt very far away in that moment, replaced by something that felt impossibly, frighteningly real. The morning sun streamed through the shelter's windows, painting golden rectangles on the worn carpet. Gracelyn hummed softly as she sorted through donation receipts, grateful for the quiet start to her day. The shelter's residents were mostly out job hunting or at appointments, leaving the old Victorian house peaceful. The front door chime broke her concentration. Looking up, her heart stuttered. Damien Rhodes stood in the doorway, his expensive suit a stark contrast to the shelter's modest surroundings. His trademark smirk played across his lips as he surveyed the room. Quite the cozy little operation you've got here," he drawled, stepping inside uninvited. Gracelyn rose from her desk, squaring her shoulders. "You're not welcome here, Damien. Please leave." He ignored her, picking up a children's toy from a nearby table and turning it in his manicured hands. "You know, I've been watching your little publicity stunt with Jack Cross." His voice dripped with mockery. "It's quite entertaining. The billionaire and the social worker. Like a modern fairy tale." "I have work to do," Gracelyn said firmly, though her hands trembled slightly. She pressed them flat against her desk. Damien's smile widened, sharp as a blade. "You really think he's interested in you? In this?" He gestured dismissively at the shelter. "Oh, sweetheart, men like Jack Cross don't end up with women like you. You're a temporary distraction, good press during his company crisis. Nothing more. You need to leave. Now." Gracelyn's voice was stronger than she felt. He set the toy down with exaggerated care. "When this all falls apart, and it will, don't come crying back to me. I won't be there to pick up the pieces this time." "I would never come back to you," Gracelyn said quietly. "Not if you were the last man on Earth." Something dark flashed in Damien's eyes. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "We both know better than that. You're playing dress-up with Cross, pretending to be something you're not. But I know the real you, the scared little girl who needed me to make all her decisions. That girl is still in there, isn't she?" Before Gracelyn could respond, the shelter's security guard appeared in the doorway. "Everything okay here, Ms. Parker?" "Mr. Rhodes was just leaving," Gracelyn said, not breaking eye contact with Damien. He held up his hands in mock surrender. "Of course, wouldn't want to overstay my welcome." At the door, he paused. "Enjoy your fairy tale while it lasts, Gracelyn. Reality's going to hit hard when it's over." The door clicked shut behind him. Gracelyn's legs felt weak, and she sank into her chair. Her hands shook as she reached for her water bottle. Damien's words echoed in her head, finding all the weak spots in her carefully built confidence. The rest of the day passed in a blur. By evening, when Jack picked her up for their planned dinner date, she'd managed to push the incident to the back of her mind. Or so she thought. The restaurant was intimate, tucked away in a quiet corner of the city. Jack had reserved a private booth, away from prying eyes. But as their appetizers arrived, he frowned slightly. "You're quieter than usual tonight," he observed, setting down his fork. "Everything okay?" Gracelyn attempted a smile. "Just tired. Busy day at the shelter." Jack's eyes, warm and concerned, studied her face. "Try again. Something's bothering you." She toyed with her napkin, debating whether to burden him with this. "Damien showed up at the shelter this morning?" Jack's expression darkened immediately. "What did he want?" "To remind me that I don't belong in your world," she said softly. "That us, it's all temporary. Just good press during your company's crisis." "I'll handle him," Jack said, his voice tight with anger. "He has no right to—" "No," Gracelyn interrupted firmly. "I don't need saving, Jack. I just need peace." She met his gaze steadily. "I've spent too much of my life letting men fight my battles, even when they meant well." Jack's expression softened. He reached across the table, covering her hand with his. "I'm sorry. You're right, of course." He squeezed her fingers gently. "You know, you're stronger than anyone I've ever met. Sometimes I don't feel very strong." She admitted. "That's what makes you even stronger," he said quietly. "You keep going anyway." They finished dinner talking about lighter things. The shelter's upcoming fundraiser, a funny story about Jack's first attempt at coding, the stray cat that had adopted the shelter's back porch. By the time Jack dropped her home, Gracelyn felt more centered, though Damien's words still echoed faintly in her mind. In her apartment, she changed into comfortable pajamas and knelt beside her bed to pray, as she did every night. The familiar ritual brought comfort, but tonight her prayers felt different, more confused, more urgent. "Lord," she whispered, "I need guidance. This arrangement with Jack. I'm starting to feel things I shouldn't, things that weren't part of the plan." She pressed her clasped hands to her forehead. "He makes me feel safe, but that scares me too. Because what if Damien's right? What if this all ends and I'm left with these feelings that I never meant to have?" Across town, in his penthouse apartment, Jack Cross stood at his floor-to-ceiling windows, watching the city lights below. His reflection stared back at him, looking more uncertain than any business rival would believe possible. Gracelyn's words from dinner played through his mind. "I don't need saving. I just need peace." Her quiet strength had touched something in him, something he thought had died with his wife years ago. He thought about how she looked at the shelter, confident and in her element, how she laughed at his terrible jokes, how her hand had felt in his at dinner, small but steady, the way she stood up to Damien even though she was scared. Jack ran a hand through his hair, messing up its usual perfect style. This wasn't supposed to happen. The arrangement was supposed to be simple, mutual benefit, nothing more. But somewhere between the fake smiles for cameras and the real ones across dinner tables, something had shifted. He walked to his bedroom, but knew sleep wouldn't come easily tonight. Not with his mind full of Gracelyn's courage, her softness, the way she balanced strength and vulnerability so beautifully. The question he'd been avoiding for days now demanded attention. Was any of this fake anymore? The city hummed below, millions of lives intertwining in their own complicated dances. But for Jack, the world had narrowed to one persistent thought, the terrifying, exhilarating possibility that what had started as pretense had become something very, very real. The Crosstech Industries building stretched toward the clouds, its glass exterior gleaming in the morning sun. Gracelyn Parker stood at its base, her heart fluttering as she looked up at the 60 floors above her. The marble lobby ahead seemed to stretch endlessly, filled with people in crisp business attire rushing purposefully in every direction. She smoothed her simple navy dress, the nicest one she owned, and took a deep breath. "You can do this," she whispered to herself, clutching her leather portfolio closer to her chest. The security guard smiled warmly as she approached. "Miss Parker, Mr. Cross is expecting you. Please follow me." The elevator ride to the top floor gave Gracelyn time to collect her thoughts. Jack had invited her to discuss their joint appearance at an upcoming charity gala benefiting women's causes, but being in his world made her feel like a fish out of water. The elevator doors opened to reveal a stunning executive floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking view of Atlanta's skyline, while elegant modern artwork adorned the walls. Jack's assistant, Sarah, greeted her with a knowing smile. "He's just finishing up a call. Can I get you anything? Water? Coffee?" "Water would be lovely, thank you." Gracelyn managed, trying not to feel overwhelmed by the luxury surrounding her. Before Sarah could move, Jack's office door opened. He emerged in a perfectly tailored charcoal suit, his face lighting up when he saw Gracelyn. "There you are," he said warmly, walking toward her with long strides. "I hope the traffic wasn't too bad." "Not at all," she replied, relaxing slightly at his familiar presence. Even in this intimidating setting, Jack had a way of making her feel at ease. He placed a gentle hand on her lower back, guiding her through the office. "Let me introduce you to some people before we talk about the gala." His voice held a note of pride that made her cheeks warm. As they walked through the executive floor, Jack introduced her to various department heads and team leaders. To her surprise, many already knew her name, and spoke highly of Safe Haven's work. "We're excited about the upcoming partnership," one marketing director said enthusiastically. They passed a cluster of reporters in the conference room, presumably there for a press briefing. One of them, a sharp-eyed woman in a red blazer, called out, "Mr. Cross, could we get a quick comment about how you and Miss Parker met?" Gracelyn tensed, their rehearsed story ready on her lips, but Jack surprised her. "God's timing," he said simply, his voice carrying a sincerity that made her breath catch. The reporter looked thrown by his candid response, clearly expecting something more sensational. In Jack's office, with its panoramic views and elegant furnishings, they settled onto a comfortable leather couch to discuss the gala plans. But Gracelyn found herself distracted by his earlier words. "God's timing?" she asked quietly. Jack met her eyes steadily. "Sometimes the simplest truth is the best one. Whether we planned it or not, I believe there's a reason our paths crossed that night." The afternoon passed quickly as they worked through the details for the upcoming event. As the sun began to dip lower in the sky, Jack checked his watch. "We should head to the lake house now. The photographer wants to catch the golden hour light." The drive to Jack's lakeside home took them through winding roads lined with towering trees. Gracelyn watched the scenery change from urban to pastoral, her nervousness about the photo shoot easing as Jack shared funny stories about his early days building the company. The house, when they arrived, took her breath away. Modern yet warm, it seemed to emerge organically from the landscape, all glass and natural stone overlooking a pristine lake. "This is beautiful," she breathed, taking in the peaceful setting. "It's my sanctuary," Jack admitted. "I come here when the city gets too loud." The photographer, a cheerful woman named Maria, had them pose in various spots around the property. What could have been awkward felt surprisingly natural. Jack's gentle humor and genuine warmth made it easy to laugh and relax. Between shots, Jack led her down to the lake's edge. "Ever skip stones?" he asked, picking up a smooth, flat rock. Gracelyn shook her head. "I never learned how." "Here," he said, standing behind her. He placed a stone in her hand and guided her arm. "It's all in the wrist, like this." Their first few attempts were hopeless failures, splashing ungracefully into the water. But soon, under Jack's patient instruction, Gracelyn managed to make a stone skip 3 times across the surface. "I did it!" she exclaimed, turning to him with delight. Her celebration was cut short as she lost her footing on the slick rocks. Jack's arms shot out, catching her before she could fall into the water. They both burst out laughing at her near miss, and then suddenly became aware of how close they were standing. The laughter faded, replaced by something electric in the air between them. Jack's hands were warm on her waist, steady and strong. His eyes, usually so guarded, held a tenderness that made her heart race. They drew closer, pulled by some invisible force. Gracelyn could feel his breath on her face, could see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes. The moment stretched like honey, sweet and slow. Then the first raindrop fell, landing on Gracelyn's cheek. They both looked up as more drops began to fall, creating ripples on the lake's surface. The spell broke gently, naturally. Jack stepped back, though his hands lingered at her waist for a moment longer. There was no awkwardness in the almost kiss, no fear or regret, just mutual respect and understanding that some things couldn't be rushed. "We should head back," he said softly, "before we get soaked." The drive home was quiet but comfortable, filled with the kind of silence that feels like a conversation all its own. Gracelyn watched the raindrops race down her window, aware of a warmth in her chest that had nothing to do with the car's heating. It was a feeling she hadn't experienced in years, this gentle, gradual unfolding of something beautiful, something that didn't need to be named or rushed or questioned, something that felt, despite all logic, like coming home. As the city lights began to appear through the rain-streaked windows, Gracelyn found herself offering up a silent prayer of gratitude, not for the grand gestures or the business arrangements, but for the simple things: stone-skipping lessons, genuine laughter, and the safety of being seen and valued for exactly who she was. The rain continued to fall softly, washing the world clean as they made their way back through the familiar streets of Atlanta. In the comfortable quiet of the car, with the memory of almost kisses and lakeside laughter still fresh, Gracelyn felt something she thought she'd lost forever. Hope. Blooming, quiet, and steady in her heart. 3 days after their afternoon at the lake house, Jack's text message made Gracelyn's heart skip. "Mother insists on meeting you. Dinner tonight at 7 o'clock. Gracelyn stood in front of her mirror, smoothing down her best navy blue dress. It was simple but elegant, all she could afford on a social worker's salary. Her hands trembled slightly as she fastened her mother's pearl earrings, the only fine jewelry she owned. The restaurant Jack had chosen was housed in an historic mansion in Buckhead, Atlanta's most prestigious neighborhood. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over dark wood panels and white tablecloths. A string quartet played softly in the corner. Jack waited for her at the entrance, looking handsome in a charcoal suit. His smile was warm, but carried a hint of anxiety. "You look beautiful," he said, kissing her cheek. "Ready?" "As I'll ever be," Gracelyn replied, trying to keep her voice steady. Margaret Cross sat perfectly poised at their table, her silver hair swept into an elegant updo. She wore a cream-colored designer suit that probably cost more than Gracelyn's yearly salary. Her scrutiny was immediate and razor-sharp. "So lovely to finally meet you, dear," Margaret said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Jack has been quite secretive about this whirlwind romance of yours." Gracelyn felt the subtle emphasis on whirlwind like a paper cut, small but stinging. "It's wonderful to meet you too, Mrs. Cross. Jack speaks very highly of you." "Indeed." Margaret's perfectly manicured fingers tapped the stem of her water glass. "And what exactly do you do at this shelter of yours?" "We provide safe housing and support services for women escaping domestic violence," Gracelyn explained, passion warming her voice. "We help them rebuild their lives through job training, counseling, and—" "How charitable," Margaret interrupted, her tone suggesting she'd just discovered something unpleasant in her soup. "Though I imagine it must be quite different from the circles Jack typically moves in." Jack's jaw tightened. "Mother, I simply mean, dear, that there's quite a gap between social work and the corporate world. Different expectations, different standards." Margaret sipped her wine delicately. "Have you ever attended the Symphony Gala? Or the Governor's Ball?" "No, I haven't had that pleasure," Gracelyn admitted quietly. The sound carried volumes of judgment. "Well, there's quite a learning curve to our society. So many subtle protocols. I'm sure you'll find it all rather overwhelming." Jack set his fork down with more force than necessary. "Mother, Gracelyn's work changes lives. That matters more than knowing which fork to use for the fish course." "Of course, darling. I'm simply concerned about compatibility. After all, we wouldn't want anyone to feel out of place." Each word landed like ice water on Gracelyn's skin. She thought of her tiny apartment, her second-hand car, her life dedicated to helping others rather than accumulating wealth. In Margaret's eyes, she could see how lacking she must appear. "Would you excuse me for a moment?" Gracelyn stood, her legs shaking slightly. "I need some fresh air." She made her way to the restaurant's garden terrace, drawing deep breaths of the evening air. Behind her, she could hear Jack's voice rising in controlled anger. "That was completely unnecessary, Mother. Gracelyn is one of the most genuine, compassionate people I've ever met. I'm looking out for you, darling. After Caroline's death, you were so lost. I won't watch you settle for someone who can't possibly understand our world." "Our world?" Jack's laugh was bitter. "You mean the world of pretense and perfect manners masking perfect cruelty? Because that's not my world anymore." Gracelyn couldn't bear to hear more. She walked back to the table, head high despite the tears threatening to fall. "I'm sorry, but I should go. I have an early meeting tomorrow." "Gracelyn, wait." Jack started to rise. "Please, stay with your mother." She managed a small smile. "Thank you for dinner, Mrs. Cross." The night air felt cool on her heated cheeks as she walked to her car. She'd been foolish to think she could bridge the gap between their worlds. A social worker playing Cinderella. How naive she must seem to people like Margaret Cross. Back at Safe Haven, Gracelyn sat on the front steps, looking up at the stars. The shelter's familiar brick walls felt more like home than any fancy restaurant ever could. Here, at least, she knew who she was and what she was worth. The sound of footsteps made her look up. Jack stood there, his tie loosened, his expression troubled. "I've been driving around looking for you." "You didn't have to leave your mother." "Yes, I did." He sat beside her on the steps, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "I'm so sorry about tonight." What she said, none of that matters to me. "But it should," Gracelyn said softly. "She's right. I don't fit into your world, Jack. I don't know the right forks or the right people or the right way to be the kind of woman your mother expects." "You don't need to fit into my world," he told her, his voice gentle but firm. "Maybe I need to fit into yours." Gracelyn turned to look at him, tears finally spilling over. "What?" "This place. What you do here. It matters. You change lives every day. You help people heal and hope again." His hand found hers in the darkness. "That's worth more than all the society galas in the world." A police siren wailed in the distance, and somewhere down the street, music thumped from a passing car. But on the shelter steps, in the quiet space between them, something shifted and settled into place. They sat together in comfortable silence, their hands touching lightly, fingers barely intertwined. The night air carried the scent of jasmine from the shelter's small garden, and above them, the stars continued their ancient dance across the sky. In that moment, Gracelyn realized that sometimes belonging isn't about fitting into someone else's world. It's about finding someone who sees your world as beautiful too. Gracelyn arrived at Safe Haven early that Monday morning, fumbling with her keys as she tried to balance a stack of donation paperwork and her coffee. The autumn air was crisp, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and new beginnings. As she approached the shelter's entrance, she noticed something odd. The lights were already on inside. Her heart quickened. Had someone broken in? But then she spotted Jack's familiar black car parked discreetly around the corner. Confused but curious, she pushed open the door. "Surprise!" The voice came from somewhere inside. Following the sound, Gracelyn walked toward the kitchen and stopped dead in her tracks. Where there had once been peeling cabinets and a temperamental stove, now stood gleaming stainless steel appliances, pristine countertops, and warm wooden cabinets that made the space feel like home. "Jack!" Her voice wavered as she took it all in. "What did you do?" He emerged from behind the new center island, looking oddly nervous despite his usual composed demeanor. "I may have made a few improvements while you were away this weekend." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she'd come to recognize as a sign of uncertainty. "There's more if you'd like to see it." Still stunned, Gracelyn could only nod. Jack took her hand, something that no longer felt strange or formal, and led her down the hallway. When they reached what had once been an unused storage room, he paused. "Close your eyes." She did, trust coming easier now than she would have believed possible just weeks ago. The door creaked open, and Jack guided her forward a few steps. "Okay, look." Gracelyn opened her eyes and immediately covered her mouth with her hands. The drab storage space had been transformed into a bright, cheerful children's room. Colourful murals of forests and fairy tales danced across the walls. Child-sized furniture filled the space, reading nooks with soft cushions, art tables with neat rows of supplies, and shelves lined with new books. "The women who come here often bring their children," Jack explained softly. "I thought they deserved a space of their own. Somewhere they could just be kids again, you know?" Tears welled in Gracelyn's eyes. Before she could respond, she heard gasps behind her. The shelter's residents had begun arriving for breakfast, drawn by the commotion. Their reactions made her own heart swell even more. Maria, a young mother of two, burst into tears at the sight of the kitchen. "My children can have hot meals every day now," she whispered in awe. Her little ones were already exploring the new playroom, their eyes wide with wonder. Sarah, who had arrived just last week with nothing but a backpack and a broken spirit, ran her hands over the smooth countertops. "It's like a real home," she said, her voice thick with emotion. Throughout the morning, more women arrived, each reaction more touching than the last. They hugged each other, cried together, and began immediately planning the meals they could now cook for their families. The children's laughter echoed from their new space, a sound that filled the shelter with more hope than any renovation could provide. Jack stood back, watching it all with quiet satisfaction. Gracelyn caught him wiping his eyes once when he thought no one was looking. "You did all this in just 2 days?" she asked him privately. He shrugged, trying to downplay it. "I had help. And money does have its advantages sometimes, like being able to rush orders and hire extra crews." "Jack." She touched his arm, struggling to find words big enough for what this meant. "This changes everything for them. For all of us." He turned to face her fully then, his eyes serious. "You changed everything for me first." The moment hung between them, weighted with things still unsaid. But before either could speak further, Lydia burst through the front door with an armful of grocery bags. "I got your text about the new kitchen and brought supplies for a proper celebration breakfast." She stopped short, taking in the scene. "Oh my word. When you said new kitchen, I didn't realize you meant a whole new world." The morning evolved into an impromptu party. Women who had once been strangers now moved around each other like family, cooking together in the new space. Children's artwork already decorated the playroom walls. The shelter hummed with an energy it had never known before. Later that evening, at the scheduled gala celebrating Safe Haven's recent successes, the mood remained buoyant. The ballroom sparkled with elegant decorations. But Gracelyn noticed Jack kept looking at his phone, checking photos of the morning's reactions at the shelter. When it came time for speeches, Jack surprised everyone by taking the podium. He wasn't scheduled to speak, but the room immediately fell silent. Something in his bearing commanded attention, not from authority, but from the quiet sincerity that radiated from him. "When I first got involved with Safe Haven," he began, "I thought I was doing a favor, making a donation, improving my public image, all the usual reasons people like me get involved with charities." He paused, his eyes finding Gracelyn in the crowd. "I had no idea I was the one who would be saved." The room grew still, hanging on his words. "Through Safe Haven, I've learned that true strength often comes disguised as vulnerability, that sometimes the bravest thing we can do is ask for help. And that love, real love, isn't about power or control or fitting into someone else's world. It's about finding someone who makes your own world bigger, better, more beautiful. Gracelyn felt her heart racing as Jack stepped away from the podium and walked toward her. The crowd parted naturally, creating a path between them. Some people kiss to escape the past, he said, his voice carrying clearly through the silent room. Others kiss because they've found their future. Then he was there, standing before her, his eyes full of everything they'd both been afraid to say. When he kissed her, it wasn't for the cameras or the crowd or any reason except that his heart demanded it. The kiss was slow, deep, and absolutely real. The world beyond them faded into a distant blur of applause and camera flashes. When they finally parted, Gracelyn could hardly breathe. The room erupted in cheers and congratulations, but she barely heard them. All she could see was Jack's face. All she could feel was the certainty that something fundamental had shifted in the universe. Hours later, as they walked through the quiet streets toward her apartment, their fingers intertwined naturally. The city hummed around them, but they moved in their own pocket of peace. "We're not pretending anymore, are we?" Gracelyn asked softly. Jack stopped walking and turned to face her. "I don't think I've been pretending for a while now." She nodded, understanding completely. "I don't know where this is going," she admitted, "but I trust you." His smile was gentle, full of wonder. "That's all I need." They stood there on the sidewalk, the streetlights casting a soft glow around them, both marveling at how a fake kiss at a charity gala had led them here, to something more real than either had dared to hope for. 2 weeks of pure joy had changed everything. The fake relationship that had started with an impulsive kiss had blossomed into something real and precious. Gracelyn found herself humming in the mornings, her heart light with possibility. Jack had become a regular presence at the shelter, showing up with coffee and donuts, fixing things around the building, and most importantly, bringing genuine warmth to everyone he met. But on a sunny Tuesday morning, everything shattered. Gracelyn's phone exploded with notifications before she even got out of bed. Her hands trembled as she opened the first message, a link to an article with a glaring headline, "Gold Digger Exposed, the Truth Behind Atlanta's Fairy Tale Romance." The story was everywhere. Someone had leaked what appeared to be text messages between her and an unnamed friend, discussing how to trap Jack Cross for his money. There were photos too, images of her and Jack manipulated to look sinister, suggesting clandestine meetings and calculated moves. She knew immediately who was behind it. Damian Rhodes's fingerprints were all over this character assassination, though he'd been careful to keep his name out of it. Her phone rang. Lydia's voice was tight with concern. "Have you seen?" "Yes." Gracelyn's voice cracked. "It's all lies. Those texts, they're fake. The photos are doctored." "I know that, honey, but it's bad out there. Really bad." Gracelyn opened her laptop and felt sick. Every major news outlet in Atlanta had picked up the story. Social media was ablaze with speculation and judgment. Worse were the comments. Thousands of strangers calling her horrible names, making assumptions about her character, threatening to boycott Safe Haven. Then came the emails. Her work inbox filled with angry messages from donors threatening to pull funding. Some contained explicit threats. Others simply dripped with disappointment and disgust. She tried calling Jack, but it went straight to voicemail. Her text messages showed as delivered, but unread. The silence felt deafening. By mid-morning, she couldn't take it anymore. She got dressed, her movements mechanical, and drove to Crosstech Industries. The security guard recognized her, but his usually friendly smile was replaced with a wary look. "I need to see Jack," she said, hating how her voice shook. Mr. Cross is in meetings all morning, ma'am. Please, it's important. After several calls, she was allowed up. The elevator ride to the top floor felt endless. When the doors opened, she stepped into chaos. People rushed back and forth, phones rang constantly, and the air crackled with tension. Jack's assistant, Sarah, intercepted her with an apologetic look. He's with the board right now. It's not good. Gracelyn sank into a chair, waiting. Minutes stretched into an hour. Finally, the boardroom doors opened, and a stream of serious-faced executives filed out. None would meet her eye. Jack emerged last, looking exhausted. When he saw her, relief flooded his face. Gracelyn. He crossed the room in quick strides and pulled her into his office, closing the door. Jack, I swear to you, none of it's true. Damien, he must have... I know. Jack's voice was firm. I believe you completely. Tears spilled down her cheeks. The things people are saying... We'll fight this. I've got my best people on it. We'll prove the texts are fake, expose the photo manipulation. The office door opened, and 3 people in expensive suits entered without knocking. Gracelyn recognized them as Jack's PR team. Mr. Cross, we need to discuss damage control immediately. The woman in front, Claire Matthews, spoke as if Gracelyn wasn't even there. The board is demanding action. Our stock has dropped 12 points since opening. This isn't the time, Jack said sharply. With all due respect, sir, it's exactly the time. Claire's voice was steel wrapped in silk. We need to release a statement immediately. Distance ourselves from the situation until we can verify. There's nothing to verify. Jack interrupted. The accusations are false. Nevertheless, public perception. I don't care about public perception. Claire's expression hardened. The board does. They're talking about a vote of no confidence, Mr. Cross. Your position as CEO could be at risk. Gracelyn watched Jack's face pale slightly. She knew what this company meant to him. It was his father's legacy, his life's work. What are you suggesting? He asked quietly. A temporary pause in the relationship. Just until we can clear this up. We'll frame it as a mutual decision to focus on respective responsibilities while... No. The word burst from Gracelyn's lips. Jack, please. He wouldn't look at her. How long would this pause need to be? Claire's voice was smooth. A few weeks. Maybe a month. Just until we can gather evidence and change the narrative. Gracelyn felt something inside her crumble. You said you trusted me, she whispered. Now Jack did look at her, and the conflict in his eyes was unbearable. I do trust you. This isn't about trust, it's exactly about trust. Her voice was barely audible, and about courage, and about what matters most. She stood up, her legs somehow supporting her, though everything else felt like it was falling apart. Jack reached for her hand, but she pulled away. Gracelyn, wait, please, let me explain. But she was already walking away, her vision blurred with tears. She heard him call her name again, but didn't stop. Couldn't stop. The pain in her chest was too big, too raw. Behind her, she heard Claire say something about the right decision and damage control. But the words were just noise now. The elevator doors closed on the image of Jack standing in his office doorway, looking torn between following her and staying put. As she drove away from Crosstech Industries, the city seemed different, colder, harder. Her phone kept buzzing with notifications, but she ignored them all. The triumph of Damien's revenge felt complete. He hadn't just destroyed her reputation, he'd poisoned something pure and precious just as it was beginning to bloom. Back at her apartment, Gracelyn sank to the floor, finally letting the sobs take over. On her coffee table, yesterday's newspaper lay open to a photo of her and Jack at a children's hospital event, both of them laughing as a little girl showed them her artwork. The headline read, "Atlanta's Perfect Pair. How quickly perfect could shatter, how easily trust could break, and how much it hurt to realize that sometimes love wasn't enough to make someone fight for you. The morning sun streamed through the shelter's windows, casting long shadows across the worn linoleum floor. Gracelyn worked methodically, her hands moving in steady circles as she scrubbed the kitchen counters. The physical labor helped quiet her mind, even if it couldn't silence her heart. 3 days had passed since she'd walked out of Jack's office. 3 days of ignoring calls, avoiding news sites, and throwing herself into the shelter's endless needs. The work was her anchor, keeping her from drowning in the storm of emotions that threatened to overwhelm her. "Miss Parker?" A soft voice interrupted her thoughts. Sarah, one of the shelter's newest residents, stood in the doorway, clutching her 4-year-old daughter's hand. "Can I help?" Gracelyn managed to smile. "Of course. Would you like to help me make lunch?" Soon they fell into a rhythm, chopping vegetables, stirring soup, kneading dough for fresh bread. The simple tasks felt sacred somehow, like prayers without words. Other women drifted in and out, some offering help, others just seeking the comfort of company. "You're hurting," Sarah said quietly as they worked. "We can see it, but you still take care of us." Gracelyn's hands stilled on the cutting board. "Taking care of others helps me remember who I am," she admitted. "Sometimes when everything feels broken, helping someone else puts the pieces back together." The morning stretched into afternoon. Gracelyn cleaned rooms, changed bedsheets, sorted donations. Every task was a distraction from checking her phone, from wondering if Jack had tried to reach out again. The shelter needed her. These women needed her. That had to be enough. Across town, in his corner office, 42 stories above Atlanta, Jack Cross stared unseeing at his computer screen. Financial reports and project updates blurred before his eyes, meaningless strings of numbers and words. His usually razor-sharp focus had abandoned him. "Sir," his assistant knocked gently. "The board is waiting for your decision on the Thompson merger." Jack rubbed his temples. "Tell them I need another hour." "They've been waiting since yesterday, sir." He knew that. Just like he knew his inbox was overflowing, his calendar was packed with urgent meetings, and his PR team was still demanding statements and strategies. But every decision felt hollow, every choice tainted by the memory of Gracelyn's face as she walked away. The intercom buzzed. "Sir, your mother is here." Jack sighed. "Send her in." Margaret Cross swept into the office like a cool autumn breeze, elegant in pearl grey silk. Her silver hair was perfectly coiffed, her makeup flawless. But there was something different in her eyes as she studied her son. "You look terrible," she announced, settling into a chair. "Thank you, Mother. Always a pleasure." "When did you last sleep properly?" Jack's laugh was bitter. "I don't remember." Margaret was quiet for a long moment, watching him. "I saw the news coverage," she said finally, "about the allegations. Mother, please, I can't handle another lecture about, I was wrong about her." The words hung in the air between them. Jack stared at his mother, certain he'd misheard. "I was wrong," Margaret repeated softly. "About Gracelyn Parker, about what she deserved, about what you deserve." "Mother, let me finish." Margaret's voice wavered slightly. "After your father died, I became rigid, protective. I thought maintaining our social position would keep you safe, would keep you from being hurt again after losing Sarah." She twisted her wedding ring. "But I watched you these past weeks with Gracelyn. I saw you smile again, really smile. I heard you laugh, that deep laugh that used to shake the house when you were young." Tears glimmered in Margaret's eyes. "And now I'm watching you lose that again." Lose her like you lost your peace after Sarah died. I can't." She took a shaky breath. "I can't watch you disappear again." Jack's throat felt tight. The board be damned." Margaret's voice was fierce. "Your father built this company from nothing because he believed in something bigger than profit margins. He believed in doing what was right, even when it was hard, even when it cost him." She stood, smoothing her skirt with trembling hands. "Don't lose her like you lost your peace," she whispered. "Some things are worth fighting for." After she left, Jack sat motionless in his darkening office. The city lights began to twinkle on, a galaxy of artificial stars spread out below him. His empire, his prison. Something compelled him to his knees. He couldn't remember the last time he'd prayed, really prayed, not just mouthed empty words, but now the words poured out, raw and real. "God," he whispered, "I've been so lost, so afraid. I buried myself in work after Sarah died, pretending I was honoring her memory when really I was hiding from life, from love, from you." His voice cracked. I need forgiveness. I need courage. I need to know how to make this right." Tears fell freely now, spotting his expensive suit. "Please," he breathed, "show me the way back to her, back to myself, back to faith." The office was silent except for his ragged breathing. But somewhere deep inside, a knot began to loosen. A door began to open. And Jack Cross, who had spent years building walls around his heart, felt them finally begin to crumble. He stayed there, kneeling in prayer as the moon rose over Atlanta. In the shelter across town, Gracelyn was also awake, sitting by a window with her own prayers rising like incense into the night. Two hearts, broken but beating, reaching for healing, for hope, for the courage to believe in love again. The night wrapped around them both like a blanket, holding their separate vigils, their separate pain, their separate prayers. But even in their separation, something was shifting. Something was healing. Something was preparing to bloom from the ashes of what had been broken. The morning sun painted Atlanta's skyline in shades of gold as Jack Cross stood before his office window one last time. His resignation letter lay on the polished desk behind him, each word carefully chosen. The weight of the decision settled on his shoulders, not as a burden, but as a mantle of purpose. His assistant, Marie, knocked softly before entering. "Sir, the board is assembled in the conference room." Jack straightened his tie, a small smile playing at his lips. "Thank you, Marie, and thank you for everything these past 10 years. Her eyes widened. "Mr. Cross, it's time," he said gently. "Sometimes we have to lose something to find what matters most." The boardroom fell silent as Jack entered. 12 faces turned toward him, expressions ranging from concern to curiosity. Thomas Wheeler, the head of the board, spoke first. "Jack, we've known each other 20 years. Whatever this emergency meeting is about, I'm stepping down as CEO," Jack announced, his voice steady. "Effective immediately." The room erupted. Papers rustled. Chairs scraped against the floor. Wheeler's face turned red. "This is absurd. The company needs you. The shareholders need someone whose heart is fully here." Jack finished. He placed his letter on the table. "I'm temporarily stepping down to rebuild what truly matters. Mark Stevens will serve as interim CEO. He knows the company, he shares our values, and he has my complete trust." "This is about that woman, isn't it?" Another board member spoke up. "The social worker?" Jack's eyes hardened. "This is about integrity, about remembering why my father started this company, not just to make money, but to make a difference." He looked at each person in turn. "I've spent years hiding behind spreadsheets and quarterly reports, thinking success meant sacrificing everything else. I was wrong." Wheeler stood up. "Jack, please, be reasonable." "I am being reasonable, for the first time in years." Jack's voice softened. "I'm not abandoning the company. I'm choosing to be the kind of man who deserves to lead it." As he left the boardroom, his phone buzzed. A text from Lydia, Gracelyn's friend. "Damien's planning something big. Press conference at 2 o'clock. He's going to try to destroy the shelter." Jack's jaw clenched. He'd been expecting this, Damien's final attempt at revenge. His fingers flew across the screen. "I'll be there." Across town, Gracelyn paced in her tiny office at Safe Haven. Her hands trembled as she read Damien's press release announcement. He claimed to have evidence of misappropriated funds, of women being turned away, of safety violations. All lies, but lies that could destroy everything they'd built. "We have all the documentation," Lydia assured her, spreading papers across the desk. "Every donation, every expense, every inspection report. We've done nothing wrong." "Truth doesn't always win," Gracelyn whispered, remembering too many times when Damien's charm had twisted reality. The shelter's main room was already filling with reporters and cameras. Damien had chosen their location deliberately, wanting to humiliate her on her own ground. Women and children who called Safe Haven home huddled in back rooms, away from the circus developing outside. At 1:55, Damien strutted in, immaculate in his designer suit. His smile was razor-sharp as he approached Gracelyn. "Last chance?" he murmured, too low for others to hear. "Step down quietly, admit your failures, and I might be merciful." Gracelyn met his gaze steadily. "I'm not afraid of you anymore." He chuckled. "You should be." 2 o'clock arrived. Cameras flashed as Damien took his place at the makeshift podium. His voice oozed concern as he began his speech about troubling discoveries and duty to the public. Gracelyn's heart pounded. This was it. Everything she'd worked for, everything these women needed, about to be destroyed by... The door opened. A familiar figure stepped inside, tall and determined. Gracelyn's breath caught as Jack Cross made his way through the crowd. He didn't hesitate, didn't falter. He walked straight to her side and took her hand. Damien's speech stuttered to a halt. Reporters swiveled their cameras, murmuring, rising like waves. "Mr. Cross." Damien recovered smoothly. "I'm afraid you're interrupting." "No." Jack's voice filled the room. "I'm ending this." He squeezed Gracelyn's hand. "For too long, I've let fear and pride keep me silent. Not anymore." He turned to face the cameras directly. "This morning, I stepped down as CEO of Crosstech Industries, not because of scandal or shame, but because sometimes we have to lose something to find what truly matters." His eyes found Gracelyn's. "The woman I love didn't ruin my name. She restored my soul." The room exploded with questions. Cameras flashed like lightning. But before Damien could speak, new figures appeared at the door, police officers in dark uniforms. Damien Rhodes. One stepped forward. "We need you to come with us." Damien's face went pale. "This is ridiculous. I'm in the middle of trying to destroy an innocent woman's reputation to cover your own crimes." Jack's voice was steel. "The fraud investigation into your real estate dealings is quite thorough. My security team was happy to share everything they uncovered." Damien lunged forward, but officers caught him. As they led him out, his mask finally cracked. "You think you've won?" He snarled at Gracelyn. "You're nothing. You'll always be nothing." "No." Gracelyn's voice was quiet but clear. "I'm free." The door closed behind them. For a moment, the room was silent. Then Jack turned to Gracelyn, his eyes soft with emotion. "I'm sorry it took me so long," he whispered. Tears spilled down her cheeks. "You came back. I'll always come back." He touched her face gently. You taught me how to trust again, how to believe in something bigger than myself. His smile was tender. How to love without fear. Reporters crowded around them, questions flying like arrows. But Jack and Gracelyn barely noticed. They stood together, hands clasped, hearts beating in sync, as the afternoon sun streamed through the shelter's windows. It touched everything with gold, the worn furniture, the faded walls, the faces of the women watching from doorways. In that light, nothing looked broken anymore. Everything looked like it was beginning to heal. Lydia appeared at Gracelyn's side, holding a stack of documents. Should we show them the real story now? She asked, grinning through tears. Gracelyn looked at Jack, who nodded. Together they turned to face the cameras, ready to share the truth about the shelter, about their love, about the power of faith and second chances. The truth that sometimes, when everything seems lost, grace finds us in the most unexpected ways. The late afternoon sun painted Atlanta's skyline in shades of amber and rose as Jack's car wound through the city streets. Gracelyn sat beside him, still processing the whirlwind of events at the shelter. Her hand remained intertwined with his, neither wanting to let go. "Where are we going?" she asked. Noticing they weren't heading toward either of their homes, Jack's eyes held a gentle mystery. Somewhere special. The car pulled up to the Grand Monarch Hotel, its marble facade glowing in the evening light. Gracelyn's breath caught. This was where it all began, where a desperate kiss had changed everything. "Jack," she whispered. He helped her from the car, his touch reverent. The doorman nodded knowingly as they entered the lobby. Their footsteps echoed across the polished floor as Jack led her toward the grand ballroom. "I made arrangements," he explained softly. "The room is ours tonight." The massive doors opened to reveal the ballroom transformed. Gone were the crowds and chaos of that first night. Instead, hundreds of tiny lights twinkled from the ceiling, casting a warm, golden glow. The grand chandelier sparkled above, its crystals catching and scattering light like fallen stars. Gracelyn's eyes widened as she took in the empty space. "It looks magical." "It was magical that night," Jack said, leading her to the center of the room. "Right here, this exact spot." He gestured to where they stood. "This is where my heart woke up." Tears pricked at Gracelyn's eyes as she remembered. The fear, the impulse, the kiss that had started everything. "I was so lost before you crashed into my life." Jack continued, his voice thick with emotion. "Living but not alive, successful but empty." He squeezed her hands. "You didn't just kiss me that night. You shocked my soul awake." "Jack?" Gracelyn's voice trembled. "These past weeks have taught me so much," he went on, "about trust, about faith, about what really matters." His eyes were bright with unshed tears. "You showed me that true strength isn't in controlling everything. It's in being brave enough to let love in." Gracelyn watched, heart pounding, as Jack slowly lowered himself to one knee. The chandelier light caught his face, illuminating every tender emotion there. "Gracelyn Parker," he said softly, "I'm not asking you to marry me to fix me, or to complete me, or to save me." He pulled out a small velvet box. "I'm asking you to marry me so we can build something beautiful together, something that helps heal others the way God used us to help heal each other." He opened the box, revealing a delicate ring with a single, perfect diamond. "Will you marry me?" Tears blurred Gracelyn's vision as she looked down at this man, this strong, gentle soul who had learned to be vulnerable, who had chosen love over fear, who had stood beside her when the world turned dark. "Yes," she whispered, then louder. "Yes." Jack slipped the ring onto her finger, then stood and pulled her close. Soft music began playing. He must have arranged that too, and they began to dance, swaying gently in the golden light. Their laughter echoed through the vast space, bouncing off walls that had once witnessed their first desperate moment. But this time there was no pretense, no fear, no judgment, just joy, pure and complete. "I love you," Gracelyn murmured against his chest. "I love you too," Jack replied, spinning her slowly under the chandelier. "And I promise to keep choosing you every single day." They danced on, holding each other close, their shadows merging on the polished floor. In this room where their story began, they now wrote a new chapter, one of redemption, of second chances, of love that builds rather than breaks. The chandelier sparkled above them, witness to both their beginning and this beautiful new beginning, as they danced, laughed, and loved in the soft, golden light of their answered prayers. The September evening wrapped Atlanta in a golden glow as the city's most prominent charity gala buzzed with excitement. The Grand Monarch Hotel's ballroom, draped in shimmering silver and white, sparkled under the same chandelier that had witnessed a desperate kiss exactly 1 year ago. But tonight was different. Tonight, Gracelyn Cross Parker stood confident in an elegant emerald gown, her hand resting comfortably in her husband's. Jack beamed with pride as they greeted guests, his wedding ring catching the light with each handshake. "Mrs. Cross Parker?" A reporter called out. "Could you tell us about the Foundation's latest initiative?" Gracelyn's face lit up. The Cross Parker Foundation just opened its 3rd women's shelter in downtown Atlanta, she explained, her voice steady and sure. "We're focusing on providing not just safety, but opportunity, job training programs, counseling services, and childcare support." Jack squeezed her hand gently. "My wife's vision has transformed how we approach community support," he added, his eyes soft with admiration. "We've helped over 500 women restart their lives this year alone." The original Safe Haven shelter had flourished under their joint leadership. What was once a struggling non-profit now served as the model for their expanding network of support centers. The walls that once felt cold now rang with children's laughter and women's voices raised in hope rather than fear. Margaret Cross, elegant in navy blue, approached them with a warm smile, such a change from her initial frostiness. "The donors can't stop talking about your work," she said, hugging Gracelyn. "I've never been prouder to be part of this family." As the evening progressed, Jack and Gracelyn made their way through the crowd. They stopped to chat with shelter residents who had become success stories, businesswomen who had once been scared and homeless. Each embrace, each tear-filled thank you, reinforced the purpose that had brought them together. During dinner, Jack clinked his glass and stood to address the room. 1 year ago, in this very ballroom, I met a woman who would change everything. He began, his voice carrying across the hushed space. She taught me that true strength lies not in power or control, but in the courage to be vulnerable, to trust, to love. Gracelyn watched him speak, remembering how far they'd both come. The broken man who had lost his wife, who had buried himself in work, now stood tall and open-hearted. The frightened woman she'd been, running from an abusive past, had found her voice and her purpose. The Cross Parker Foundation isn't just about providing shelter, Jack continued. It's about creating spaces where grace meets hope, where second chances become new beginnings. And none of this would exist without the bravest woman I know, my wife, Gracelyn. The crowd applauded as Jack reached for her hand, helping her to her feet. The orchestra began to play, and he led her to the dance floor. Other couples joined them, but in their hearts they were alone beneath the chandelier. "Do you remember how it all started?" Jack whispered, holding her close. Gracelyn laughed softly. "With one foolish kiss," she replied, thinking back to that desperate moment when she'd thrown herself at a stranger. "Not foolish," he corrected gently. "Faithful. You took a leap of faith that night, and God turned it into something beautiful." The lights dimmed as the music swelled. Jack cupped her face in his hands, and their lips met in a kiss that held nothing of fear or pretense, only love, trust, and gratitude. Around them, the city glowed through the ballroom's windows, its lights twinkling like stars, each one representing a life touched by their shared mission. They had learned that love's greatest power lies not in grand gestures or perfect moments, but in daily choices to believe, to trust, to serve. Their story had become more than just their own. It had multiplied into hundreds of stories of hope and healing, of women finding their strength, of communities coming together. As the orchestra's final notes faded away, Jack and Gracelyn remained on the dance floor, their foreheads touching, their hearts beating in sync. Outside, Atlanta stretched toward the night sky, a city transformed not just by their foundation's work, but by the simple truth they had discovered. That sometimes the bravest thing we can do is believe in second chances, and that love, when grounded in faith, has the power to heal not just two hearts, but countless others. In the end, their greatest accomplishment wasn't the foundation or the shelters or even their marriage. It was the ripple effect of grace they had set in motion, touching life after life with the same hope that had brought them together under this very chandelier 1 year ago. The night wrapped around them like a gentle embrace as they shared another kiss, their love story continuing to unfold in ways neither could have imagined, when a desperate moment led to destiny. Thank you for being here. If something in this story stayed with you, I'd love to see you again. Subscribe, and tomorrow I'll bring you another story crafted with heart.